but all the paint in the world is worthless if you got nowhere to put it. Or if you just got a little square millimeter. We are back, baby, with another reflection, the Daily Vedantic. And today's reflection is on the source of joy. The source of joy. What is the source of joy? I'll pause to see what answers come about in your own mind. What answers do you even think I'll say? Source of joy. What is the source of joy? I'll give it 12, 13 seconds for you to just think, okay, what would the answer be? What is the answer in your own mind? If you have some good answers, write them in the comments or send a DM on Instagram to the Daily Vedantic. Would love to hear your own answers. If you're kind of at a loss for words and throwing up your hands like, shit, never really thought, what is the source of joy? Yesterday we talked about the anatomy around motivation, what this philosophy says around that. Talked about the definition of the word philosophy, definitions of the word love and wisdom. What I friggin' love about this philosophy is that it gets so precise to define these things that you could spend a whole lifetime searching for, never even knowing how to define it, much less where to find it. Source of joy. I certainly never had. Man, shit, I thought probably most of my life, linguistically, didn't have an answer for it, but behaviorally, I thought joy was in sugar, sensual pleasure, respect and admiration from others, desire from the opposite sex. But let's go through those one by one. Are those the source of joy? Sugar. Well, give me enough of it and I will throw up. So that can't be the source of joy. Give me enough of it and it'd be terrible for me. I aches and pains, diabetic. So certainly is not just in that or nearly any sensual pleasure. Give me enough scoops of ice cream and beautiful taste or soft, velvety touch. And over time, you build a neutralization to it. Even perfect weather here in LA, right by the beach. There's a neutralization to it to where, swear to God, unrelated to this episode, but 2 days ago, it started to shift into fall. And I started to feel like, man, I'm nostalgic for cooler weather, for it to feel a little bit like fall, for the sun to come in at a slightly different angle. Craving a switch. Man, I would love a good thunderstorm here. They never happen. And growing up in Texas, love a great lightning and thunderstorm. So you give someone, perhaps yourself, I know for myself, enough of one thing that we think is idyllic and we realize, okay, joy isn't in that. The example it's mentioned on this podcast pretty often is give yourself 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 6 weeks, 6 months, toes in the sand, sipping on pina coladas. 6 weeks of that every day, all day. The thing that we hold in our heads as, oh, that would be paradise. Is it? After 3 weeks of doing nothing but sitting on the beach, toes in the sand, on your 195th pina colada, does it still feel like paradise? 6 weeks? 8 weeks? Or is there something within you that's like, oh shit, this is 6 months, 6 years, this would be hell. So it's not in sensual pleasures, success, career, achievement. Well, There are plenty of people that finally make partner at the law firm and are going through their second divorce. Miserable as shit. In fact, in terms of professions, the most critical for watching out for suicide and mental health crises, most critical point, according to research around professionals and the relationship with mental health, is right after a graduate student gets their PhD. Doesn't matter the discipline. But that professional pursuit of graduate school to get a PhD is right after they get their PhD, after spending 9 years trying to get it, that they're like, F, what did I just do? Not everyone, of course, but that is the largest spike in mental health crises in any professional pursuit. Is it in achievement of getting that thing that you spent 9 years and a couple $100,000 trying to get? I remember when I sold a company and a bunch of zeros hit my bank account that day, 2-3 hours later, got a $72 parking ticket. And I remember being pissed about that parking ticket because it was like 6 inches over the red line. Couldn't believe it. For about 30, 45 minutes, maybe a couple hours later, thought about it again and was like, that's total bullshit. So the day that a bunch of money hit a bank account that completely dwarfed a $72 parking ticket, but whatever bliss that deposit gave me, it was possible for it to be undone by a $72 parking ticket. So it's not in joy. And I also remember how stressed it was because it was also the day that I realized how much I was paying in taxes for that amount that was hitting the bank account. So it wasn't just in this big deposit. There were other factors that kind of undid that joy. There was gratitude, there was appreciation, but there was also some confusion and frustration with that parking ticket. And I'll never forget just that stupid, silly little roller coaster of the day that I thought was going to be, and for a decade of work thought would be, pure joy. What does this philosophy say about the source of joy? It's not very intuitive, at least for many of us in the West that are trained to think it is in a bank account. It is in sensual pleasure with the 2,800 advertisements. We are gifted by our society each day. The average American experiences 2,800 advertisements a day, at least in a study that I saw back in 2015. And what does this philosophy say in contrast to these things and achievements when it comes to joy? Abstinence. Abstinence. That's the source of joy. And if you think, when I say the word abstinence, you think I'm talking about like staying away from sex, how classic of our culture and the modern world we live in, where that word only comes up, especially in the Bible Belt. I grew up in Dallas, so that word would have easily just been synonymous with like staying away from sex. If that was abstinence, when you think of that word and that's what you think of, then you are classic and I am classic. And that is just culturally classic. But I don't mean staying away from sex. Abstinence as the source of joy, I guess in some ways could be related. But I certainly don't mean just that. Abstinence. Abstinence, abstaining from sensual pleasure, abstaining from sugar for 10 hours, for 3 days. That is the gunpowder, the TNT. That is the dynamite and the fireworks that make for the explosions, is the backdrop and canvas of abstinence. Because exposure to the sugar, to the achievement, to the perfect weather, the exposure leads to neutralization. It becomes less and less joyful, pleasurable, the more exposure we have. So it's not in exposure, which is what we conventionally think. It's actually in the abstinence. You have a fifth scoop of ice cream within 10 minutes. Not that joyful, not that enjoyable, not that pleasurable. But you wait 10 days. You have a scoop of ice cream. Delish. You wait a month. You wait 2 months, 3 months. You wait a year. And that first ice cream after a year, oh my goodness, is it so tasty. Tastier than second, third, fourth, fifth in the span of 10 minutes. It's not in exposure. The source, the backdrop, the canvas for that pleasure and that joy is in the abstinence. Now, this is where it gets phenomenally practical. When we recognize that the exposure leads to neutralization, exposure over and over and again leads to neutralization. And that abstinence, abstaining from it, abstaining from that thing that gives you pleasure, builds up an investment towards joy. Then when we see that work in our lives, you do a bunch of hard work, you eat the frog, as they say at IDEO, the design company, to start every day. Eat the frog. Do the thing you least want to do. As Joseph Campbell would say, the treasure you seek is in the cave you least want to enter. Joseph Campbell, a noted Vedantin, by the way. The treasure you seek is in the cave you least want to enter. Abstain away from the caves that you want to enter, that have all the trinkets and joys and shiny objects that you think bring you joy, the fleeting ones. And you go after the one that's like, all right, I'm going to do that really hard thing. I'm going to abstain from the surface level pleasures and joys, indulgences, and I'm going to go deep into that hard work that might take a year, might take 5, might be, and this ties so well to yesterday's episode, it might be the work where it's like, all right, I'm not going to get anything out of this. This is what I'm going to give. I'm going to surrender to a duty-bound existence, which we're told in this philosophy, chapter 18 of the Gita, surrender to a duty-bound existence and immediate peace follows. Instead of surrendering or being tractor beam sucked into indulgence, I'm going to surrender to duty, and boom, not only do you get peace on the other side, but that abstinence grows and grows the amount of enjoyment and pleasure you'll get when you do tap into that indulgence, when you do have that sugar, that sensual pleasure, that when you do light the match to that firework and it goes off, it's because you've stored a whole bunch of gunpowder in that firework. It's a bigger firework. It ain't no black cat. It's one of those fireworks show ending spectacles because you've been investing in it, abstaining from the indulgence. That reorientation with abstinence is so powerful in our day-to-day lives because then we recognize there is pleasure and joy latent, built in. You start to even love that you're staying away from the thing that gives you immediate pleasure and joy because you're like, you know what? 3 pieces of chocolate, that's enough. And it feels so good because you know, all right, when I have a couple pieces tomorrow, when I have a couple pieces next week, when I get that ice cream, next Saturday, if it's a weekly routine, I'm preserving the enjoyment. It's weird how you start to recognize, see the end in the beginning, see the enjoyment because of the units of abstinence you're putting into your day-to-day. But let me round this out with this philosophy, as the Buddhists say, is fundamentally oriented around the middle path. And it's not indulgence. It's not sensualism. It's not asceticism. It's not sensualism. It's right down the middle. It's using our intellects to overpower our indulgent minds, to recognize, oh, let's take the mind for a walk. The mind wants this. Let's let the mind have it. But it's also a developed and strong intellect that says, to a certain degree, not too much, everything in moderation, nothing in excess. The middle path, because it is the canvas and the paint that make the art. It's not just one, it's not just the other. The backdrop, the canvas, that is the abstinence. And the tinier, microscopic the canvas, well, the less impactful the art. The bigger the canvas, build a 90-minute movie that blows people away. That's going to be a little bit bigger than, a little more impactful than maybe a 6x6-inch painting. Or a life of 6x6-inch paintings versus just one small little postcard that you make once. The bigger the canvas, over a longer period of time, the more impactful the art. But, like I said, asceticism is not the path. Abstinence is the source of joy, but it is not the entire equation. You can sprinkle in indulgence as your intellect, a well-developed intellect, sees fit. As Joseph, my teacher within Vedanta, will say often, take the mind for a walk. Even Swami will watch 4 episodes back to back of Animal Planet in the afternoon. It's not always just go, or give until you're exhausted without proper rest or proper understanding of our systems, including what the mind might need. Go get that ice cream. Have that drink. But should you have 4 right before you drive home? Probably not. But all the paint in the world is worthless if you got nowhere to put it. Or if you just got a little square millimeter. To utilize all of the things that this existence give us for joy, pleasure. To utilize it properly. Invest in the right size canvas. That's today's reflection on the Daily Vedantic. We'll see you next time.